anytime I get curious about what's going on mentally with folks, I call Dr. Ralph May, and he tells me.
Well, at least I try to.
It's really informative, and it helps me to understand what's going on with people. And so my question to Dr. May had to do with the vaccine and people's reluctance to get the vaccine. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And it's easy to just toss it out there like that and let you run with it. What is going on with people with COVID-19 reluctance? But the vaccine is, it's a real puzzler, isn't it? There are incentives out there. I read a report this morning that it was the YouGov poll, as a matter of fact. I have it somewhere in the stack this morning. 60% of people who won't get the vaccine now say, if you give me $100, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think it's a case of where the motivation to get the vaccine is a question. There are some people who will not get the vaccine. I mean, we know this in terms of compliance with all kinds of medical interventions, is that there are some people that are just strongly opposed to particular interventions, and they will not. There are some people that are just ambivalent about it, uncertain about it. Like some people are concerned because the vaccines only have FDA emergency authorization. They're not fully authorized. I've heard some people say, well, once it's fully authorized, I'll consider it. So there's some like scientific ambivalence for some people, even though the data is supportive that the vaccine's absolutely safe and effective. There are some people that still don't believe this virus is as dangerous as it is. I mean, there are some people that still believe because they haven't been personally affected or they haven't known someone that's been personally affected by COVID, that it's not really that serious. It's not really that significant. They can watch television, they can hear reports, but they can distance themselves from those events because they don't have we call it salience. How salient, how relevant is this to me and to my family? Is the risk worth it? Is the risk worth it to me? And so people are hesitant because of misinformation or just outright not wanting to take the chances.
Yeah, and I found it interesting as well. A study that was out last week said that Republicans don't trust it because Joe Biden says that you should take it. Democrats don't trust it because Donald Trump said. And to me, that's just looking for excuses.
It's excuses. It's like, again, when people, and we talked about this before, Todd, about fear. People are afraid. They're not sure what to believe. And when you're afraid and you don't know what to believe, you tend to regress to what you're familiar with. So if you're a Republican, you're going to regress toward, that end. If you're a Democrat, you're going to regress toward that end. And we get polarized and politicized, and we're not looking at just the facts of the situation. This virus, I said before, it's sneaky because 30% of the people that have this don't even know they have it, but they still spread it. And so one of the reasons the vaccine is so important is not just to keep you from getting sick, but to protect others you come into contact with. You come into contact with 10 people, maybe only one person is really susceptible, but that's one person that's life is in danger. And so convincing people of that, though, is very difficult. I was reviewing the literature on taking blood pressure medicine, for instance. This is very interesting because hypertension is something you really don't know you have, right? Until it's measured by your blood pressure cuff at their doctor's office. And you really don't have symptoms until it's too late, until you're having heart trouble, you might have a stroke. But only about 35% of the people who have hypertension don't take their medicine regularly.
Even though they know they
have it.
Yeah.
Because you don't get a sudden headache. You don't get a sudden bellyache. You don't get something that reminds you that you need to do this. And I think with the vaccine, it's kind of similar. There's nothing really saying to you, I got to have this or I'm not going to be okay. And so we have to continue to kind of press, in my opinion, kind of public duty, responsibility for one another, that we have a responsibility to protect each other. The vaccine is about protecting each other as much as protecting ourselves. And the reason to get it then becomes sort of public duty, a sense of personal responsibility, shared responsibility. We have a lot of freedom in this country, but with that freedom comes responsibility for one another. And I keep hitting that point that we don't live in a vacuum here. We live with one another. We're social people. And we'll do better, by the way, once we're back together again. The stress of being apart, we're going to be talking about that a lot in the next few years, about the impact the social separation has had on us. And it's going to take a while for us to kind of really appreciate what impact that's had on us.
Does COVID-19 ever become, for us as a general public, what the flu is?
It could be. I mean, it could reach a point where every year we need to get a vaccine. We anticipate what it is. We should wear masks during high-risk periods. I think we'll reach a point where during high-risk periods when there's outbreaks, I don't think we'll have to shut down everything. I think it'll be more like We'll track areas where there are problems. We'll do mitigation in areas where there are problems. We're going to encourage people to get boosters. I mean, we're talking about boosters now. I've had Pfizer, and probably I'll need a booster this fall or next winter, and almost everybody will. I think that's we'll anticipate the virus. Our scientists will anticipate how to concoct or modify the vaccines, and we'll try to stay ahead of it as best as we can. And the new technology is actually pretty good. People are afraid of it, but my read of it, it's really good.
How much of people's reluctance to, and I guess this is all part of the mix of different reasons that you just gave for people not getting it, how much of it has to do with, in the early days of the pandemic, what we were getting in terms of recommendations from the government, wild swings. You need a mask. You don't need a mask. Right. You need to be isolated. If you're isolated, you're going to get it. If you're not isolated, you're going to get it. The government does bear a lot of the blame for that because their messages were so mixed. They continue to be mixed today.
Yeah, they do. And I think one of the things the virus has exposed is that we do not. And this is where I get frustrated because I'm part of HHSS here in Indiana County, preparing for pandemics, preparing for terrorist attacks. We've been doing this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Our plans weren't really used because the higher order felt that they had a different approach. And the problem is they didn't have a very good approach. They didn't. And we were caught in a bad situation without good planning. And a lot of people were really not well organized. And I think what we've learned from this, and I hope what we've learned from this, is just like this is 9/11. In terms of a virus, that we learn we have to always stay vigilant. We have to have systems in place that pay attention to these things, that monitor them. They give us alerts early. They give us clear instructions. At the beginning, they really didn't know how to respond to this very effectively, and they didn't want to admit it. And that's one of the problems. I think that's why that's shaken some confidence, and it's taking a while for people to get confidence back. I have confidence in the key people that have known about this, that have argued about it. There are people that knew that this was going to happen. And I think that's very frustrating to know that, there are people that said, look, this is a high-risk thing. This could happen to us. Mm-hmm. And it was ignored.
Yeah, that trust aspect of it all is really, really difficult. Once that trust is maybe not even violated, but you perceive that it has been violated, that becomes a problem. It becomes a block for people to follow through on this. And, when you combine all of those different reasons and aspects that you've been talking about, that's where we run into problems with this. 70% is the number that they're saying right now is when we'll be considered to be having herd immunity. And do we ever get there?
There's certain areas of the country that will, and certain areas of the country that won't. And I think that's the next problem we're going to find is that you talk about herd immunity. Well, you'll have that in certain places and you won't have it in other places. And then what are we going to do with that? I mean, people travel. We open up the country again, so there'll be places where we have herd immunity and places that we're not. I listened to Fauci talk yesterday, and he's right. He's saying, look, we got to loosen things up. We have to let the vaccines work. Some people have natural immunity because they've had COVID. It's not just the vaccines now. It's people who have had COVID and they have natural immunity. Mm-hmm. So I think that we'll reach a point where we'll have to roll. We'll have to take our chances with it and keep an eye on it. And in truth, I think the reason people's confidence is low is that it was not handled well. The other thing is there's unknowns here, and we have to embrace that too, is that we're facing a certain unknown quality to these viruses. Mm-hmm. Everyone's a little different. There isn't any treatment right now. I think that's the other issue is there's no real good treatment. So if you get really sick, the only thing we have is supportive measures to help your body fight it off. So that's the other thing that needs to be developed. Once we have treatments, I think that'll also make it a little more viable for us to be more open.
And Pfizer has announced in the last couple of days, a week or so, that they do have a therapeutic that just might be
by the end of the year. We hope.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I said this before too, Todd. That 10 years, 20 years from now, they're going to be talking about the innovations that have been driven by COVID. I mean, terrible things like this drive creativity and innovation. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's unfortunate it has to be this way, but we go back to salience. Sometimes we don't respond and react and develop things that we need until we absolutely need them. And unfortunately, that usually involves some real negative things.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to me as well when you talk about reasons to and the reasons people will not get the vaccine, that when you involve the most vulnerable of our population, our parents, our grandparents, that might be something that breaks through to people. You can't see them until you're both insulated against this with the vaccine, or you have that experience of somebody having gotten it and maybe even lost their life to it before it really hits home.
And that's the thing, is that I think that there has to be some way that people understand how serious this is. I mean, think of the number, Todd. Over 600,000 Americans have died from this virus. I mean, that's the number doesn't, you can't even wrap your mind around that kind of number. I mean, and that's in the past year. I mean, and so it's we have to remember that this is a true number. This is what happened to people. And we have to remember that even if it hasn't touched us personally, that we have a responsibility to one another to prevent that. It could have been a heck of a lot worse if these vaccines hadn't been able to be rolled out.
Yeah. He's Dr. Ralph May joining us here this morning. Our time is always too short when we're visiting with you because there's so much that we could get into. But I appreciate your coming today. It's a good chance for us to tell folks that today, no appointment necessary for people who want to get the COVID-19 vaccine. You can just walk in at the KCAC, and that starts in a couple of minutes at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, IRMC's done a great job with the vaccination program, so I would encourage everybody to get down there.
Absolutely. All right, so there you go. 9 o'clock is when it opens, just a couple of moments now. And no appointment necessary to get your COVID-19 vaccine. Just have to be 16 or of age or older. Those who are 16 or 17 need to be accompanied by their parent or guardian. And you got to take your proof of age, your ID, and that's all you really need. Dr. May, thanks.
Thanks, Todd.
May, thanks.
Thanks, Todd.